Hello, beautiful woman of Gaia, and thank you for joining me for this Facebook Live broadcast on this super important topic of healthy boundaries. So, welcome, and yes, let's really start talking about this incredibly important topic of healthy boundaries. So setting boundaries has been the golden thread throughout all of the inner work that I've facilitated with women for about over the last 15 years. And this is truly a life-changing practice. And it seems to be specifically challenging for women. So I really want to speak into that a little bit today. And before we dive into that, at the end of kind of like every year, I sit down in meditation and I tune in and I kind of always ask the question, how can I serve women in anchoring the sacred feminine this year? And then I just listen. And the coursework, Healthy Boundary Masterclass, really just started flowing through. And so I'm deeply inspired and super excited to be sharing this masterclass, which I have designed and developed for you this year. And I think it's something that will really serve us in our collective and also in our personal lives as we look at this amazing watershed moment of women really rising after the Me Too campaign last year, and also the time is really now for women to really step into the truth of their power. So, okay, before we dive into the three core reasons that people don't honor our boundaries, I thought let us just quickly turn our gaze inwards and just really center ourselves and open up all of the senses of the body so that we can really listen and hear to what really resonates for us. So for a moment, I'd like you to just close your eyes and just turn the gaze inwards into this really beautiful, magnificent, amazing body, this vehicle, this little piece of Gaia, a little piece of nature that you've been gifted with. And we're going to start by just taking a nice, slow, deep breath in. Hold that breath. As you release it, just sigh out this breath. Just letting go of the day and the week stuff. Just coming home to your heart, to your center. Another nice, slow, deep breath in. Holding that breath. Exhaling and out your mouth. And one more. And release that breath. And I want you to just give yourself permission to hear and to feel whatever you need to in order for you to create the change and transformation which your heart is really calling for. So I want you to open your eyes, but I want you to stay connected to your sensory body and your truth. So let's start with, if we want to talk about boundaries, we've really got to talk about why boundaries are important. So in the absence of boundaries, chaos thrives. And boundaries can either really make or break relationships, and therefore they're incredibly important. So what is a boundary? A boundary is the setting, or boundary setting is a practice of self-respect and also respecting others. So boundaries is the structure of the value system which you put into place to define which people, which situations, or which experiences you really want to include in your life. And those are the experiences, the people, and the behavior which really resonates with you, resonates with who you are, resonates with your value system, and resonates with what you want and what you need, and how you want to feel ultimately. So boundaries are really, if you've worked with me before, you know that I work with the balance between the masculine aspect and the feminine aspect, and boundaries are really the divine masculine sacred container. And this sacred container is what helps us to really hold thriving relationships, and to help that unfold and to help keep that in place. So another way to describe boundaries is kind of with the sacred container, you know, or the system is, I cannot dance with you if I don't know what the dance steps are, if I don't know what the music is, if I don't know which steps we're going to be using. So when you share with me what the music is, what the dance is, what the steps are, then we can really flow in harmony together. And this is really the way that I see, boundaries as that sacred container. So in its simplest form, a boundary is really saying yes or no. And being very clear with yourself with that yes or no, to really say what you mean and mean what you say. So we usually have boundaries on a continuum or on a spectrum. So on the one end, you either have very loose boundaries or no boundaries whatsoever. And usually on this side of the spectrum, you have no discernment, you take on everybody's stuff, you take on responsibility for everybody's happiness, you will probably be taken advantage of quite a lot. You never say no, and there's absolutely no boundary. On the other side of the spectrum, your boundaries are too rigid. So if we think about it in terms of homes representing you, if you have no boundaries, it's basically your house, there's no fence, nothing. Everybody can see into your house, everybody can come at any time. And on the other end of the spectrum is too rigid a boundary where you have your house, there's a wall, there's a moat, there's some crocodiles in the river, and you basically just block out everything and everybody because you've been hurt so much. And so this is your defensive boundary. So it's very defensive. So that's usually when you set boundaries from that place, it's kind of with fear aggression. So there's a very beautiful sweet spot in the middle, where you have a lovely fence around your home and it's got a gate. And on the gate, there's a sign. And that sign says, you're welcome in. If you behave in this way, if you resonate with these values, if you maintain this way, and if you don't want to connect in that place, and you don't want to be there, then I'm going to ask you to leave. So that's the sweet spot in the middle. And so often we think about boundaries as a way of a wall of keeping people out, and that takes a lot of energy to push people out. And until you're kind of in a place where you're very anchored in your own truth and you're very clear about who you are and what you want and what you will tolerate and what you won't tolerate, it's good to practice that setting, becoming clear on those boundaries and using a bit of that energy to maintain it. Once you're anchored, it then shifts into an invitation where you can comfortably and confidently say, this is my sacred space. And this is the behavior and the people and the relationships and the experiences I want to invite into my sacred space. And if you want to meet me here, beautiful. If you don't, bless you, love you. We resonate on two different platforms. We have two different paths, and that's okay. And I don't need to judge you for it, and I don't need to defend or explain myself. But this is my sacred space, and this is what I invite in. So, getting to the 3 core reasons people don't honor your boundaries. First reason is that we don't define our boundaries. Very, very important. So the reason we haven't defined our boundaries is usually rooted in childhood, and there's usually some wounds there that are unresolved, so which we haven't healed from. So very often that means that we don't realize that we have a right to say yes or no through being taught how to be a people pleaser, especially for women, being taught that you have to be nice, that it's rude to say no, that you have to sacrifice yourself for your family, that you have to, these are the things that you have to do. So we don't really know that we have this value and that we have a right to say yes or no, and that we have a right, very importantly, that we have a right to ask for what we need. Very important. So if we want others to honor our boundaries, we need to take the time to very clearly define and define what our boundaries are, what we need, and really understanding what the purpose for those boundaries for us really are. So when you're clear about what matters to you and why it does, it becomes very simple to set boundaries and to maintain them in your relationships. And both in your professional world, world, yes, and your personal world. So important to take the time to really find out what matters to you, and defining your boundaries from that place. So very often we enter relationships, either romantic relationships or professional relationship, without defining what those boundaries are. And then soon enough we kind of realize, oh dear, this isn't working out. But then we're stuck because we never had that conversation. And when you get to that point, it becomes a little bit more tricky to negotiate boundaries then. So one of the best therapists I worked with personally for myself in really mastering the art of boundaries once said to me, you want to start a relationship as you mean for it to continue. So never think about being in a relationship, whether it's professional or personal, thinking that you can define things along the way. Of course, things grow organically and they change, and there needs to be a little bit of space for our boundaries to shift on either way. But when you know what they really truly are about, it becomes easy to negotiate the softer edges of what that boundary is. So if you know who you are and what you stand for and what you don't stand for, what you value and how you want to feel in every experience, then decisions become very easy, since this becomes the compass that guides your heart in every situation. So it's imperative for us to understand why we need personal boundaries, and it's important to understand why you feel physically or emotionally unsafe around your boss, for example, or around your sister, or around your mother, or around your partner, or perhaps a friend. And when you understand why you feel unsafe around those people, that's when you can really become clear around the core of why you need that boundary. So this really helps us to reflect on how and why we have allowed others to behave around us in that manner. So have you allowed people to manipulate you, to take advantage of you, or to belittle you? Or perhaps you've accepted certain situations in your life because you have a blind spot for it. And I'm going to explain a little bit now what I mean by a blind spot. So I call this blind spot kind of unresolved wounds, and that then becomes our blind spot. And here's an example. This is what I mean. So if our childhood family system, in that system, if there was belittling of one another that happened in that, and we didn't respect each other's privacy in that family system, nobody respected each other's privacy, so there wasn't a boundary for that. We learn then as children that this is the norm, that this is because this is how we see people behave around us, and we learn as children what the world is like. So and children always self-reflect as well, to remember that. So we then learn this is how people behave until we leave our childhood home and we start interacting with the world outside, and perhaps then we realize, okay, wait, this isn't really the norm. Other people don't specifically maybe behave like this, and that's usually our blind spot. To whatever we thought was the norm or became the norm in our childhood is our blind spot, because we're not going to see it because it seems normal to us, right? So a tip or a tool here with number one is it's important for you to clarify what you need in order for you to still feel safe around others. You can start by making a list of the behaviors, of the people and the situations that no longer feel safe for you. So think about what it is that you value and think about what is sacred to you. And make that list, and from there, it'll be easy for you to start clarifying and defining what your boundaries, your personal boundaries are. Number two, of our three core values, or core reasons why people don't honor our boundaries. So number two is that we don't communicate our boundaries effectively. So if we are unclear about what our boundaries are, we cannot communicate them then to others. And what we do then is we expect other people to somehow kind of just to know what our boundaries are, or to be mind readers in that case. So, for example, if someone does something that makes us feel uncomfortable or distressed, and we choose to keep quiet in that moment, either for the peace sake, or we think the next time somebody does something like this, that's when I'm going to say something. What we're doing is we're teaching that person that their behavior is okay, because we're not saying, no, that's not okay. We're keeping quiet. And in keeping quiet, we're teaching that person that behavior is okay. So or another example is when we say yes and we actually mean no, we will start building up resentments. So here's an example. Your friend asks you to look after her dog. And you either don't really have the time or the energy to look after this dog, or maybe you're just not even a dog person, but you've said yes because you have the disease to please, and you silently kind of resent it. So you're going to be doing this with a lot of resentment, and in the process, you're really betraying yourself because you're not respecting your friend and you're not respecting yourself. In the end, only two people are going to get hurt, and that's you and probably the dog. So the same goes for saying no, right? So sometimes we say no when we mean yes. So here's an example. Perhaps you have a very beautiful message to actually share, and you are asked to do a public talk, and you say no. Your heart's really saying yes. I'm terrified, and I have this beautiful message to share, but I don't feel good enough, and therefore I'm going to sabotage it, and I'm just going to say no. So in that instance, you say no when actually you mean yes, and what you're doing is you're really stopping yourself from experiencing this amazing opportunity, and really not, and you're betraying your sacred purpose in that moment. So it really is up to you to let people know what behavior you will allow in your presence. That's really our responsibility. Now, one of the most important things that I have worked with women, especially when it comes around boundaries, is that there seems to be a resistance to setting boundaries. And I've often asked women that I've worked with, this question, and what is it that makes you feel uncomfortable around setting those boundaries? It either feels too rigid for them, or they feel like they may be rude if they're setting a boundary, or there are different reasons for different women, and I'd want you to really explore this question for yourself. If you want to master the art of setting boundaries, this is a very important question to explore. So what I've seen around this resistance is that here's the blind spot again, right? So our blind spots are unconscious beliefs which hold norms in place. And if we grew up in a home in which there was addiction and there was abuse or neglect or codependency, or chaos was kind of the norm, then we will probably have a very challenging time drawing boundaries and resist setting them completely. So the blind spot illuminating questions you can ask yourself is to think about the kind of home environment that you grew up in, And here are a couple of questions which you can explore for yourself. So the first question is really, were you allowed to have any privacy? Could you close the bathroom door? Physical privacy. Could you close the bathroom door or your bedroom door? Were you allowed privacy? Second question I have for you is, were you allowed, this is really emotional boundary, were you allowed to have and express a different worldview to the majority of the family? So could you be autonomous? Could you have the space to really express yourself, especially if that expression or that opinion or sharing of feelings were different from the majority of the family? The third question is, was one member of the family more controlling to the rest of the family? So did you have a domineering parent or a sibling who really demanded all of the attention, which meant that you needed to almost like subjugate yourself or set any of your emotions or feelings or whatever was important to you at the time aside because somebody else's opinion or stuff was more important than yours? And then the fourth question with these blind spots is, was your confidences kept sacred? So when you shared something very vulnerable with one of the family members in your home, did they keep it confidential or did they share it with the rest of the family? So there was absolutely no confidence. Confidence is kept in the family. And if you've answered yes to a couple of these questions, then the result of these experiences often means that women have the disease to please. So that's what's at the core of this resistance. And in another video, I'll really explore the topic of our resistance story, our boundary story. You know, what is that really, and how can we really turn that around to become, you know, a thriving boundary story? So another important thing to note is that when you start communicating your boundaries, especially in relationship dynamics, which have been continuing for a while, in a very uncomfortable or toxic kind of way, is that people are not going to be happy. So they may get angry, they may express their disappointment at you, they may not respect your boundary. And the important thing here is to remember that we cannot force others to respect our boundaries, but we can consistently honor our own boundaries. So when we truly know our value, like in your heart, in your soul, in your bones, if you know that you are worthy, and you know for sure that that you're worthy of belonging and love, then we let go of taking responsibility of others' feelings. So being authentic means that you will disappoint somebody, and it's learning how to be okay with that. And knowing that this means that you respect yourself and you respect others enough to be honest, to be reliable, and to be trustworthy with your truth by being authentic. So we teach people how to treat us. So be consistent in maintaining and communicating your boundaries very effectively and clearly. What's also very important is to, when you're communicating your boundaries, is to also communicate consequences to those boundaries. Here's my boundary, if you contravene it, this is what's going to happen. So, and then it's about following through on that. So not to make empty threats, but to really just stand in those boundaries for yourself, and knowing that people will test it. They will test it. But if you know, as we said before, if you know why you've set them and why it's important to you, and you know that this is a practice of radical self-care and self-respect, then it's worth putting in that little bit of energy into really standing for your boundaries. So the third and last point of the core reasons of why people don't honor your boundaries is quite a big topic, and I'm just going to briefly do a little bit of an intro on it, and again we will I'll go into this a bit deeper in another video, is you're probably dealing with a boundary bully. So we try to set and maintain boundaries with either narcissists or difficult characters without the skill set to do that. And this is an experience which has also come up quite a lot in my work with women over the last kind of 15 years. So it's very important to identify manipulative characters and to upskill yourself on the reason why you allow this in your life, why you're allowing these manipulative characters to come into your sacred space, and how to deal with it when it crosses your path. So the tool here, or the tip here, is to tune into your discernment vehicle, this amazing body. Women are innately intuitive about these things, and when you think back on these experiences, there will always be a red flag or a thought, but what we do is we go, oh, don't be judgmental, or don't listen to that, you're being silly, or we dismiss it. And again, that's a way of disrespecting your own knowledge and your own wisdom and your own intuition. So tune into this discernment vehicle. Don't numb out. Allow yourself to feel the feelings that come up. An important thing around anger is that when we feel angry, that's usually the first sign that a boundary has been contravened. So feelings and emotions are deeply valuable if we work with them in a very honoring way. And then your sensuous body will let you know. So trust the instincts that you already have, that's innately within you. It will guide you. Can be your compass. And upskill yourself on how to stop manipulators from entering your sacred space. So that brings us to our 3 core reasons for why people don't honor your boundaries. If this resonates with you, and you would like to master the art of boundaries, I've designed a 90-day program with all of the tools and the skills and the tips that I have either gained myself personally, and I've also taught, and what I've researched and what I've learned over the last 15 years. So it really is a masterclass, and we'll be starting it in February. And if you're interested to learn a little bit more, send me a message. I can send you some information about it. And then in the meantime, I'm going to be doing a couple of these Facebook Live broadcasts on it. So I would love to hear from you. Please let me know any questions that you have, any examples, anything you're struggling with, which boundaries are easier for you, which ones are harder. Let's open up the conversation. 2018 is the year of action, and I think this is really our time to shine and to thrive. So I hope that you have a magnificent 2018, and I hope that this is the year that you really master the art of boundary setting and maintaining, so that you can experience personal freedom, lots more energy, beautiful thriving relationships, and step into that beautiful place where you deeply respect and honor yourself. Blessings. Thank you very much, beautiful woman of Gaia, for listening and tuning in. Have a beautiful day.